All of you for taking some time this evening. Obviously, we want to welcome our three candidates this evening, our local media who are here, and our local business members that are part of the audience as well. Thank you all very much for coming, and it's nice to see everyone. My name is Alan Ryan. I'm the president of the Stittsville Business Association, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for the debate this evening. The SBA is very proud to host and to fund this event. We think it's very important to have debates at all levels, and so we're honored to be part of it. We think it's important, and we were glad to be part of it. We're co-hosting this tonight with our friends at the SVA as well, and so we want to have this not only as a business platform, but also as a platform for more community-based issues as well. So any questions that you do have can be any spectrum across relating to the election, whether it be business or community-based, and all your questions are more than welcome. An event like this takes a lot of work and a lot of time and energy, volunteers, and it's needless to say we have a few people that I really need to thank for putting on this evening. First and foremost, Phil Sweeten, and Phil is one of our executive members of the Business Association, and Phil has done about 98% of the heavy lifting on this event tonight and did a lot of time and energy over the last weeks putting this together, and I really want to thank Phil for all his work, and there was a lot of work on his part, so Phil, thank you very much. Ray Lamb, to my right here, is our sound and tech guy, and like Phil, we've done this in the past, the Business Association, and we really couldn't have done it without Ray. So he does everything for us, all the technical stuff, and Ray, thanks so much again for doing such a great job. My counterpart this evening, sitting right beside me, Helene Rivet. I also call her my enforcer, and my rules official is right beside me here. And Helene, thank you so much. She's going to be our timer for this evening, and what she says goes. So Helene, thank you for taking the time again to join us. Tanya Hind is here from the Stittsville Village Association, and we're glad to have Tanya here. Tanya, nice to see you again. Thank you for coming. I also want to thank Glenn Gower, our municipal councillor, and Glenn's staff. I know they had some coordination with this, setting this up for us with some of the municipal services, and Glenn's office has always been great to help us. So Glenn and his staff, I just wanted to say thanks to them and the staff at the city for coordinating with us to get some of the logistics set up for this evening. So Glenn, thank you very much. A couple last people, Craig Sweetenham and Rob Borowski did a lot of the logistics as well. I want to thank both of them. And last but not least, Luke and Nancy Terrian, who owns Stittsville Sign and Glass here. They're great community people. They have been for a long time, and they're great friends of the Business Association. But as I said earlier, they opened their business for us tonight, so there's a public washroom there. If anybody needs to use it, it's available. And Nancy and Luke, every time we ask them to help us with something, they always come to the forefront. So I don't think they're here tonight, but I just wanted to thank them for what they always do for the community. So thank you to Nancy and Luke. Okay, let's introduce our candidates for this evening. From the Conservative Party, we have Mr. Polyev. From the Liberal Party, we have Mr. Roy. And from the New Democratic Party, we have Mr. Kwa. Welcome to each of you three gentlemen. And I want to say, in all sincerity, thank you very much for standing for public office. It's people maybe don't realize how much time and energy and commitment it takes to run for any level of office. It really does, and it takes a lot of courage and commitment. And so, thank you to all three of you for putting your names forward. I know what's involved with that, and it's a big time commitment for you and your family. And it just makes our democracy better, and it makes Canada such a great country. So, thank you very much for doing that. Just a housekeeping issue. Obviously, we want to maintain all social protocols as best we can this evening. I know everybody is is masking, and that's fantastic. And I think you're in groups of families. Otherwise, try to keep socially distanced as best you can and adhere to all those policies as best you can. That would be much appreciated. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get on to some of the rules of engagement for this evening. First of all, we're going to start off, each candidate is going to have a 3-minute opening comment at the start. Then on behalf of the Stittsville Business Association, I'm going to ask one question of each candidate. Following that, I'm going to ask Tanya Hine, the president of the Village Association, to ask a question of the candidates. And then we'll open up the floor to everybody else. Okay? And this will be done through a random draw. So everybody who came in this evening who wanted to ask a question has been put in this basket here. I'm going to draw the tickets at random. And if your number is drawn, if you still would like to ask a question, please proceed up to the mic and do so. If you don't want to ask a question, that's okay too. We'll go to the next number and we'll just pick them at random. Is that okay? Understood? Okay. The questions, we're going to ask one question per person when you come to the mic, please. And we're going to give you about 45 seconds or so to ask the questions. That would be great, just so we can put through as many as we can. The candidates will then have 2 minutes to answer the question. And how we're going to work it is this. If somebody asks a specific question to one candidate, after the 2-minute response, we're going to allow either of the other two candidates, if they wish, to have a rebuttal to that for 45 seconds. If they each want to have one, they're entitled to that. And then we will go back to the initial candidate for a 30-second closing comment on that question. If all the candidates are asked a question, obviously they'll all be able to answer the full 2 minutes. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Okay, question. Okay, good. Okay, and I guess in terms of questions, one final thing. I'd ask everyone, including the candidates, to please respect the timelines that Carleton is going to try to put forward so we can have as many questions as we can. And try to be quite succinct if you can in your questioning, if you could, to kind of get to the question as quick as you can. And we'd also appreciate very direct answers from our candidates as well. As I said earlier, this is not like the House of Commons question period, when there's a question and no answer, where we'd like to actually have answers tonight. So let's try that just for something different. We're going to have 2 questions that have been brought to me from social media, which we'll interject through the evening. And then at the end of the closing event, we will have each candidate have a closing remark for 2 minutes. I was told it's now 3 minutes, that's fine. 3 minutes each for each candidate. Okay? Okay, opening comments. I just drew these names at random. So Mr. Quay, you're up first for 3 minutes. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Oh, it's working? Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking the Stittsville Village Association and Stittsville Business Association for organizing this debate. My name is Kevin Hua. I'm your NDP candidate in this unnecessary election. Since the past 2 years we've faced through a lot of hardship, difficulty, and struggle. We've had the pandemic, we've had the revelations of the unmarked residential graves, or residential school graves. We've had to deal with a lot of issues of hate. We've had to deal through a lot of struggle. I come to you today to offer an idea of politics of compassion, that we take the lessons that we've learned from this pandemic, through cooperation, through supporting each other, that we apply it further into our future, into our politics and policies. Issues like bringing the long-term care system out of the for-profit framework. We've seen so many of our loved ones lost because of the negligence that profit has taken prior to people. We need to bring pharmacare under the public framework as well to ensure that all Canadians have access to the prescription medications that they need. Too many Canadians go without the prescription medications they need, and too many have to ration them. We need to start dealing with the climate crisis. The recent IPCC report has demonstrated that we are at a dire situation right now, that we must take action, genuine action, to protect the planet and the environment for future generations. We have to address Indigenous reconciliation. There is much that we have to address, and I think that we can do so if we do so with compassion, with humanity, and together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken. Mr. Roy?
Good evening, Stittsville. Bonsoir à tous. Thank you for holding the debate this evening. We're currently facing the two greatest challenges of our generation, COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. Our riding deserves better leadership and a more collaborative, optimistic voice in Parliament. In Carleton, this election is a choice between two parties. The Liberals, with a positive vision of cooperation, or the Conservatives, with a continuation of divisive politics. Tout au long de la pandémie, le gouvernement fédéral a démontré un grand leadership pour protéger notre santé, appuyer les travailleurs et les petites entreprises et assurer l'accès aux vaccins. I'm no stranger to helping people live better lives. I spent the last 25 years in the private sector, helping families plan for retirement and access life-changing medicines. Facts matter. Science is important. Climate change is real. And vaccines save lives. These are things the Conservatives are still debating. This week, Erin O'Toole was caught deceiving Canadians over gun policy. You can't trust the Conservative Party. What else are they hiding? What would the pandemic have looked like without the support provided by this government? How many businesses would be closed and jobs permanently lost? We all know what eliminating the deficit means in Conservative words: cuts. My priority for Carleton is to collaborate with my provincial and municipal counterparts and attract investment in green infrastructure, improve access to healthcare, expand childcare, and support those still affected by the pandemic. While the Conservatives want to save money by cutting services and neglecting systemic barriers that many of us continue to face, our plan will invest in the future to build a better, greener, and healthier Canada. À titre de député de la Chambre des communes, j'ai l'intention de défendre nos travailleurs, rebâtir l'économie locale, stimuler de bons emplois, tout en protégeant notre environnement. The Liberal plan will help us move forward together. This election, vote for Gustave. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Mr. Carleton.
Thank you very much, everyone. Great to be here under this beautiful twilight sky. I don't like much about COVID, but an outdoor debate like this is one object of relief. But not everyone feels relieved these days. Just yesterday, I talked to a young man named Dakota who works at a scrap metal yard, 60 hours a week, just so he can barely afford to split rent with 4 other people in his modest home. Not able to save a penny for a future down payment. He says that he no longer even dreams of owning a home. You ever thought how crazy it is that we're the country with the most land, labor, and lumber in the world, and yet we have the most expensive real estate, with Vancouver and Toronto being pricier than San Francisco and Singapore? You ever wonder why, with the most farmland on earth, it's now too expensive for most families to enjoy a nutritious diet? Do you ever wonder why, with the 3rd biggest supply of petroleum, we have $1.30 a liter gas, not even able to use our own resources? The cause is very simple. We're spending more and making less. Sure, we had to spend in the pandemic, but we didn't have to have the biggest deficit of all the G20 countries. They all had COVID too. Nor do we have to be on track for 50 more years of deficits, as the parliamentary budget officer forecasts. Surely COVID won't last that long. Nor do we have to keep people out of the labor market, even now, when there's over 500,000 help wanted signs on our small businesses. We have to get our people back to work. our spending back to normal, and our businesses making stuff here in Canada. The two other candidates here just said the other day, inflation is not a problem in Canada. They're not talking to ordinary people who can't keep their heads above the water. It is not an issue for the multimillionaires who've gotten richer because of inflation, but it is an issue for the people of Carleton. So Conservatives will unleash our free enterprise system to build 1 million new homes over the next 3 years. We'll reduce taxes and red tape on our farmers to produce more affordable, nutritious food. We'll allow for the construction of safe and clean pipelines so that we can stop importing dirty foreign oil into our country and provide our people with jobs and energy. To sum up, make more, cost less, paychecks, not debt. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Polyev. Okay, now on behalf of the Stittsville Business Association, I'm going to pose one question to each candidate, and you'll have 2 minutes each to respond. Okay. First question is for Mr. Polyev. Many people would say our healthcare system is in trouble and struggling to keep up with the growing demands, even prior to the pandemic. Does your party support universal health care, or do you support an introduction of a more integrated two-tier system to meet our growing needs? How should it be funded by the federal government, and how do you think it should be delivered by the provinces?
Well, there were 3 questions there. Do we support universal health care? Yes. Current Liberal government has allowed the proliferation of private user-pay health care. In fact, Prime Minister drives right by private user-pay clinics every time he goes to his taxpayer-funded country mansion at Harrington Lake. All of a sudden, he's discovered this on the eve of an election and tried to flip-flop on private user-pay health care, which until now he's done nothing to stop. In fact, Trudeau's reduced the increase in health care transfers to the provinces from the 6% Prime Minister Harper was providing to the 3% under the current status quo. Sure, he wants to interfere in how health care is run at a provincial level. This from someone who couldn't even properly procure us vaccines or rapid tests. But he doesn't want to free up the funds and the independence for our provinces to actually run the healthcare system. So how should the federal government treat healthcare? We propose a 6% annual increase. The final question is how provinces should deliver it. Well, that of course is up to provinces. In Mr. Trudeau's province of Quebec, there is user-pay healthcare, private clinics, and other private for-profit healthcare delivery, which Mr. Raw will flip-flop on today. But we believe that the most important thing is that Canadians get the health care they need in a timely fashion, and that it is the federal government's job to provide the funds and the flexibility for our provinces and our medical experts to deliver it. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question is for Mr. Waugh. Your question is, with the cost estimated in the range of $600 to $700 million of taxpayers' money, and given the fact we are now clearly in the middle of a 4th wave of a global pandemic, and finally, with Parliament in agreement not to have an election during the pandemic, why did the party call this election?
So we called an election because it's necessary to check in with Canadians. A lot has happened since 2019. The Liberals were not elected with a mandate to cover the pandemic. And you all deserve a choice in how we recover post-pandemic. We don't know when the pandemic was going to start, and we didn't know when it's going to end. And as far as I know, it hasn't ended yet. So that we have an election is a democratic right It's something that's important for Canadians, and it's something that we need to do. We're going to ask questions. We've got a program that we need validated, and we're here today to exercise our democratic right. And that's why I'm here this evening, to talk to all of you about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question goes to Kevin. Your question is, your leader, while in the House of Commons on many policy matters and key votes, has continually supported the current government and has helped them maintain their minority government. However, outside of the House of Commons and during this election, he is in direct opposition to almost everything they have done while they were in Parliament. So my question is, should we as taxpayers and voters believe in what the actions are within the House of Commons by the New Democratic Party, or the words on the campaign trail?
Thank you for the question. I would answer both. The reasoning behind that, so a large part of why the NDP backed the minority government during the pandemic is because we were in a pandemic. We don't want an election during pandemic. We need stability, and we need to bring out supports during the pandemic. That's what the New Democrats have been doing in Parliament. This included forcing the Liberal government to bring the wage subsidy up from 15% to 75%. This meant bringing in the CSB for students. This meant increasing CERB and maintaining CERB even through after the second throne speech that the Liberal government pushed. We're opposed to this election right now. Mr. Roy says that they need a mandate. They have a mandate. The New Democrats have said, we will maintain the current government to ensure that the necessary supports that Canadians need will be maintained. And look at where we are now. We're in the middle of an election that nobody wants and nobody needs. We could be working on producing policies, including pharmacare. The Liberal government, by calling this election, killed Bill C-6, a bill important enough to end the practice of conversion therapy. So, this is what it is here. This is what we are offering to Canadians. We want to move forward. We want to push on this recovery. We want to build. We want to bring pharmacare, because we've already seen what this pandemic has done. We need a robust system of healthcare here. We cannot have what Mr. Poilievre wants. He says that the Conservatives support universal healthcare. I actually like to counter that. When Mr. O'Toole was asked about universal healthcare, he said something about public-private synergy. Once you start adding in for-profit private care, you start losing universal healthcare. Once you start putting a price, somebody can't afford healthcare. And that's what we've seen in this pandemic. We've seen the free market incapable of handling things. If the free market had full control during this pandemic, millions of Canadians would have been evicted. Millions would have lost their jobs, and we've already seen what has happened in our long-term care homes. Both show New Democratic leadership, both what we've done in Parliament cooperating, and both what we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Okay, I'm going to call on Tanya Hine from the Stittsville Village Association to please come up to the mic and ask her question. Thank you.
Municipalities own a great deal of Canada's infrastructure, and they provide a lot of the frontline services that are important on a national scale. I'm thinking the opioid crisis, affordable housing, transit. How will each of your parties empower cities and municipalities as they endeavor to prioritize, fund, and deliver these services?
Why don't we start with Mr. Watt? Wong. Liberal, sorry. The guy in the center of the table, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for your question. Well, it will happen organically by working together. I think that's the basis of cooperation and collaboration. So there are budgets that are set and that are ready to be deployed from the federal government. And I think it's a question of working together to set those priorities and phase out what needs to be accomplished, and do it as a cooperative initiative. So I would see it happening together, and that's why I would envision it as me taking the time to sit down and make sure that the priorities are well understood, and that I can go out and advocate for the funds necessary to move infrastructure projects forward.
Mr. Polyev, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, municipalities have enjoyed a massive increase in revenue over the last 15 years, vastly outstripping the increase in population and the inflation. And so the question is, how can we better make use of the money we have? One example of how we can do it is Conservatives are going to require municipalities approve high-density housing close to transit stations that are federally funded. The reason why we're building transit is to move people. The challenge, though, is that municipal red tape has made Canada one of the slowest places to get housing built, particularly close to transit. That's why we have among the highest housing prices, one of the reasons we have among the highest housing prices in the world. More housing density close to transit stations will not only reduce the cost of those stations by increasing the amount picked up by fares, but it will also make housing affordable for young people who don't have cars and need transit. Here in Ottawa, another way we can save money on transportation is to free up some of the unused federal office space. I believe that we should make the work from home option a permanent option for those public servants who choose it and who demonstrate they can get their jobs done remotely. That will get cars off the road, emissions out from going from tailpipes, save money for transit, roads, real estate, and gas money for our public servants. That will also free up those office buildings, many of them that are underutilized already, to make more room for affordable housing in the downtown core for our youth and our less fortunate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwan. 2 minutes.
I would actually disagree with Mr. Polyev on one thing, in that perhaps the biggest bottleneck for municipalities is in fact funding. They don't actually get a lot of revenue in terms of their funding sources. Compared at least to the federal government and provincial governments, they get very little. So one of the biggest priorities we need to do is to help invest in those municipalities. For example, in vastly expanding public transit, as we see with the LRT, as well as electrifying a lot of the public transit we have right now. So that's how New Democrats see it. We need to support municipalities with funding. They need money. Thank you.
Thank you, Carleton. Okay, we will open it up to the floor now for questions. As I said, if you can pull out your tickets, I have tickets, I will draw them. If you want to ask a question, please proceed to the mic. Try to respect 6 feet if you can, and when you're done asking your question, I'd ask you just to return to your seat and let the next person stand up and be ready. If your number is called and you don't want to ask a question, there's no obligation to do so. I'll just pick another number. Okay? All right, the first number is ending in 410. 410. If you have a question, please proceed up to the mic. Next, we have number 457. 457. And lastly, we have number 449.
My name is Clifford Board, and my question is, I understand that currently to be employed in the federal services, you must be vaccinated. What is the position of your parties on mandatory vaccination?
We will start with Mr. Polyev, please.
2 minutes? Is it 2 minutes?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for your question. It is not currently mandatory for federal public servants to be vaccinated. Mr. Trudeau's human resource chief put out a memo just before this unnecessary election saying that public servants had a choice to either be vaccinated or tested before they go into their offices. That was the position of the Trudeau government. as recently as a few weeks ago. Suddenly, when he called the election, he flip-flopped and said that there would be consequences if you didn't get vaccinated. Asked what consequences, he couldn't name any, and said, well, I'll get the union to do it for me. And then the head of the union said, nope, we're not doing it, we don't believe you. And so PSAC will not enforce his vaccination policy. So right now it's unclear what the Liberal position is. Our position is the same as the one that was in the memo that the Treasury Board Human Resources Officer just released under Trudeau's guidance, which is that public servants who are going physically into work should either be vaccinated or tested and have a negative test. And that is the position of the Trudeau government and has been the position of the Trudeau government, although I suspect that Mr. Roy will flip-flop again on this right before your eyes. I note also the Defense Department has said that Mr. Trudeau's rhetoric on this is illegal, that when he claims he's going to ban people from their employment or fire them from their jobs, that in fact, he cannot do that. And in fact, never did the PMO or the PCO signal that that was the policy of the government. So what you have is a bunch of political theater. Let's stop dividing people, stop turning people against each other, and start fighting the pandemic. Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
Is that okay? Yeah. So there's no flip-flopping, actually. It's quite clear. Federal employees must be vaccinated. I'm sorry?
Or what?
Well, they must be vaccinated, or they'll work from home, or they'll find some accommodation with their employer. It's important to set the example. We all know that vaccines save lives, that the path out of the pandemic is necessarily going to be through the vaccines. We're setting an example, and we're seeing a lot of businesses follow that. It's a question of confidence. You want to know when you're traveling on a plane, in a train, that you're safe. There's a significant number of people that can't be vaccinated. There are children under the age of 12, and there are adults with conditions that prevent them from being vaccinated. So we know what the right thing to do, and that's to get vaccinated, and we're setting the example. It's that simple. No one's suggesting that they're going to lose their job. No one's going to be held down and administered a vaccine by force. It's just common sense. And if we want to finish this pandemic, move on to a normal life, we all know what needs to be done. And strangely enough, a large percentage of Canadians have done that. So there's no flip-flopping. It's clear. That's what we need to do, and that's what Canadians are doing. End of story.
Thank you. Mr. Fox?
Thank you. So the party's position on vaccine mandates, specifically regarding the public servants, the NDP does support the mandate requiring public servants to get vaccinated. In my personal opinion, we should also ensure that those in particularly frontline positions, positions of risk of exposure, such as schools, hospitals, be vaccinated as well. And if we cannot reach the 85% threshold for herd immunity, then the consideration of mandatory vaccinations in Canada would be something I would consider. I'd also like to point out for Mr. Poilievre that health officials, doctors, health experts have all said that rapid tests do not replace vaccines. It is not a sufficient replacement for vaccinations. And in fact, I remember speaking to a gentleman who is a paramedic in Findlay Creek, who actually used to be your old neighbor, who said he cannot consider voting for you because of your party's position on vaccines and vaccine mandates. So, I mean, it's important that we get vaccinated, and it's important that we encourage it heavily, but you know, in some spaces we have to require it if not for the sake of protecting a society and our most vulnerable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sir, before you ask your question, if you don't mind, yes, and you as well, sir, I just want to ask all the questioners, if you could just please state when you ask your question, if it's for all the candidates or for one, and then we can know how to navigate from there. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hi guys, this is for all of you. which one of you guys is willing to cut the ridiculous carbon tax? We're the highest taxed country in the world. I hear everybody telling us how we're gonna spend our way out of everything, and it's crazy. I wanna hear somebody tell me that we're gonna get out of this mess, man. This is ridiculous. I'd rather, instead of government buying stuff, spending this, doing all this crap, I wanna keep the money I earned. Yeah, and I don't believe we're not gonna be forced to vaccinate. But that was my actual question.
Okay, we're going to start the answers with Kevin, please.
I don't think we should eliminate the carbon tax, especially since it's been considered one of the most effective market-based solutions to addressing climate change. There are problems with the carbon tax, admittedly. Liberals have given exemptions to oil and gas industries, I believe 85% of their emissions, so we do need to fix that. But I don't think that's a very smart idea, especially considering what we've seen with the IPCC report, that we need to drastically take action to address climate change. And I don't believe it's either true that Canada's the most taxed country. I believe countries like Denmark and Sweden see much higher tax rates, and as a result of those taxes, they can then invest it back into Canadians or their citizens that provide benefits. I mean, it's important to know that when we invest money, the value that we get out of it isn't just spent and it's gone. Right? There are indirect economic effects from spending the money. For example, let's say we implement pharmacare. Canadian families can see up to $550 saved per year. Small businesses can see $600 per employee per year themselves as an indirect effect. And we can also see the health benefits from implementing pharmacare. People live longer, people are healthier. So, there's some consideration that I think should be taken with the context of spending, as well as the importance that we need to take some steps forward to deal with climate change. Thank you.
Mr. Roy.
The environment is our most precious resource. We have to protect it. Putting a price on pollution is just common sense. The Liberal plan returns 90% of that to you. The idea is to give large emitters an incentive to reduce their greenhouse emissions. And without that, we won't be able to tackle climate change. The carbon levy or carbon tax is a proven method of achieving that goal. And we will stand by large emitters and help them invest in technologies that will reduce their emissions. At the same time, we'll invest in public transportation. We'll expand the LRT, for example, here in Stittsville. Those are the mechanisms and those are the ways that we can help create a better future for ourselves. So I think we have to look at both sides of the equation. Putting a price on the pollution is just the start of a framework that's going to lead us to improving our environment. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev.
Well, I think we're starting to find out why this election was called. Just yesterday, Trudeau refused to rule out tax increases on the middle class. Point blank asked, refused to answer. That's why he needed the election, because the one thing he can't do with the minority government that he could do with the majority is raise your taxes. We can't believe anything they say about money. He said the carbon tax would never go over $50. Now they say it'll go up to $170. He said the budget would balance itself in just 3 years. And even before COVID, that timeline was pushed back by decades. He said the deficit would never be better than $10 billion. It was $30 billion before the pandemic. The Liberals will raise your taxes if they are given the chance. You can't believe anything they say because, again, Mr. Roy just contradicted his own leader. He just said that, Mr. Roy just said vaccines will not be mandatory in the public service. He said, you'll be asked to get a vaccine, and if you don't, you could work from home or you could be accommodated. So they changed their positions on vaccines, they changed their positions on deficits, and be assured that after the election, if God forbid they're reelected, when they no longer need your vote, but still need your money, they will raise your taxes. Conservatives will get spending back to normal, fund our programs efficiently, phase out the deficit over 10 years so that we can lower the tax burden on working families and make life more affordable for hardworking people. Thank you.
Sir,
Yes, I'm against the liberal carbon. I will answer it. I'm against the liberal carbon tax. There you go. Very clear.
sir,
Thank you for helping me with that. Appreciated the reminder.
Sir, before you ask your question, if you don't mind, I'm just going to call out a couple of numbers to get people in queue. Okay, thank you. Number 392, number 443, and number 501. If you have a question, just be prepared to come up. Thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
This question is directed primarily at the Liberal candidate, Mr. Roy, but the other two candidates are more than welcome to give their response. Now, Mr. Trudeau has famously said that he's not interested in monetary policy. Now, any caucus, governing or otherwise, should have at least someone in there that understands what monetary policy is. So my question to you, sir, Mr. Roy, is what do you understand by monetary policy? And if elected, what would you recommend that your government does in this area?
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
well, the Prime Minister did not say he was not interested in monetary policy. That was Pierre who cut the video after 30 seconds, right? So we didn't hear the rest of the answer. So I think, as I said, facts are important. So with respect to monetary policy, I think we're on the right track. So we need to keep investing for our future. That's how we're going to grow the economy. By growing the economy, revenues at the government level will increase, and that will allow us to pay down debt, reduce deficits, and support our social programs. So we need to have a longer-term view than the last quarter with respect to the economy. And I believe that we have to trust the Bank of Canada and our institutions. There is no conspiracy theory out there. We're all working together to improve our quality of life. And I think it would be a mistake to think that the Conservatives are going to wave their magic wand and make it all better. Thank you.
Would either of the other two candidates like to have a rebuttal to that? Mr. Polyev, you have 45 seconds.
Yes, well, your eyes all deceived you when the Prime Minister said in front of your eyes that he's not interested in monetary policy. That was all a conspiracy or a hallucination, according to Mr. Roy. The reason why Trudeau doesn't care about monetary policy or fiscal policy is because he's never had to pay his own bills. For working class people experiencing 2-decade highs in inflation, 30% increase in housing prices, 30% increases in gas prices, they know the real consequences of governments that pay their bills with printed money and drive up the cost of everything. It's called the inflation tax. Conservatives will not pay our bills with printed money. We will protect the value of your dollar and make life affordable again.
Kevin, you have 45 seconds.
I'd like to just address one issue that Mr. Polyev brought up, because he's been bringing up a lot lately, and that's the issue of the inflation rate. And the fact of the matter is, to say that the inflation rate is caused solely by money printing is completely wrong. We've already seen the reasoning behind it, and that's two things. One is that we're seeing economic recovery. Right after the economy essentially collapsed with a GDP growth rate of negative 11%, we saw the economy surge by 9%. That's going to cause a pressure on the inflation rate. The second issue is we've seen that this inflation rate is sectoral. It's specific sectors of the economy that's seeing it. As a result, if it's not uniform, it's not because of money printing, it's because of specific issues of demand and supply in those areas. And this isn't just my opinion or analysis. This is the analysis of economists across Canada.
Thank you, Kevin.
Good evening, and thank you for arranging this. My question primarily is to the Liberal candidate, but I would like to have the reviews from the other candidates as well. We all know that the prices of homes have risen without any fundamentals in the past 18 months under Justin Trudeau, to the extent our children now cannot afford to buy the new homes. Mr. Roy, your leader has refused to rule out imposing new tax hikes on the middle class, yet your own platform proposes new taxes on residential homes. Is the Liberal housing plan a Trojan horse to generate revenue to pay for Canada's skyrocketing debt? Thank you.
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for your question. With respect to the rising price of homes, I believe that it is a function of supply and demand. We've noticed, or we've realized in the past 18 months that with the pandemic, people are moving. And there's a lot of demand for homes. People are working from home, and interest rates are low. And that has caused a disconnect in the market and has led to an increase in home values and home prices. I would suspect over time that this would correct itself. I don't think we want to see the price of homes decline, but what we want to do is provide support for some or young families to better access home ownership. And we have a plan to do that. That's cutting down on speculators. It's providing individuals under the age of 40 with a tax-free account so that they can save for a down payment. And I firmly believe that that's the way that we're going to address the housing challenges that we're seeing right now. We've got immigration, we've got larger developments that are popping up, and we've got lots of opportunities with respect to housing. So again, looking at the last 18 months is maybe not a reflection of where the housing market is going, and I believe that home ownership will be well in reach of Canadians moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Would either of the other candidates like to make a comment on that question? Mr. Poilievre, 45 seconds.
Well, what are the fundamentals of supply and demand? Immigration, down during the pandemic. He agrees. GDP, down. Employment, down. Wages, down. And yet somehow house prices up? Why? Well, it's because the government has printed over $300 billion. That has flooded mortgage markets, increased mortgage lending by 41%, and house prices by over a third. More dollars chasing the same number of houses equals higher prices. And now the Liberals want to impose a new tax on the sale of principal residences. So it is a double whammy. You pay more when you buy and you pay more when you sell. I'm opposed to both of those things. Yeah.
Kevin, you wait for 45 seconds.
Thank you. So I think for both Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Roy, there's something needs to be understood. This has been happening since before the 18 months of this government. This has been happening even through the 6 years of the Liberal government. And what we need to do, as I think we've all established, is an issue of supply and demand. On the supply side, the NDP wants to build 500,000 units of affordable housing so that we can get shovels in the ground so that people can start having houses. On the demand side, we need to start addressing speculators, people who are just buying houses and not living in them. Houses are for living, not for building up the massive wealth that people already have. So we need a foreign buyers tax, which has been implemented in Vancouver and Toronto, has proven effective. So we need to start addressing both those sides of the fundamentals. These two have had governments for 152 years. They've been in government forever. They still haven't solved it yet. I think we need some
Thank you, Kevin.
position. Thank you.
Mr. Roy, you have the final 30 seconds if you wish.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as I said earlier, facts matter. Taxing principal residence is not in the cards unless you're planning on flipping your house within a year. So Mr. Poilievre doesn't want to really expand on that and is giving, again, the wrong impression to the citizens here in Stittsville. So there's absolutely no plan to tax your principal residence, and end of story.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call out three more numbers. I don't think we have somebody else in the queue. Numbers 460, 445, and 461. Any of those numbers, please come up and ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, if I can see it. Okay, to Mr. Roy. The Trudeau Liberal government that did not advocate strongly enough to the Biden government on behalf of Keystone XL to prevent its cancellation, and that has increasingly introduced policies that hammered Canada's oil, gas, and petrochemical sectors and taxes that unfairly targeted these sectors while exempting others, have fueled growing resentment, anger, and alienation among Albertans, prompting a groundswell of interest and separation from Canada as the only solution to their mounting job losses and tanking economy. If your government were re-elected, Mr. Roy, what plan would they implement to solve these problems and show Albertans that their contribution to Canada is valued?
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for your question. With respect to the Keystone XL pipeline, the Americans can decide on what's acceptable to them. Clearly, there was some social issues with respect to the pipeline, and it wasn't socially acceptable and was canceled. And I think we have to respect the sovereignty of other nations. With respect to Alberta, I don't believe that we're turning our back on Alberta. I think that the oil and gas sector needs to transform, and it needs to ensure that it's moving towards a more sustainable future. No one said that oil and gas was going away. It's a huge wealth that we have. It's a great resource that we need here in Canada to fuel the green revolution. So, a re-elected Liberal government will continue supporting every industry. But we need to have priorities, and we need to set those priorities and make sure that we're moving in the right direction, that we're supporting workers, but we're also investing for the future. And I think the Liberal government has a clear plan with respect to doing that, and I support it.
Thank you. Comments? Kevin? 45 seconds, Kevin.
Thank you. So I think that it's actually important to address the economic situation in Alberta. One of the biggest opportunities we have right now is investing in the green energy economy. The green energy economy continues to grow faster than the overall Canadian economy. Alberta has huge potential for solar energy and particularly geothermal energy. And with geothermal energy, we have particular, opportunity to transition oil and gas workers into that industry because it's actually quite similar in terms of the necessary skills and technicians that are required for it. So Alberta can continue to be an energy capital in North America under a green economy. So that's what we need to do, and we need to help Albertans and Albertan workers make that transition too. We can't leave them behind. No way is that going to be acceptable. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev, 45 seconds.
Well, both of these parties deserve an award from foreign oil companies. No one in Canada has done more to help U.S. oil company. I agree, we should boo foreign oil companies. They are dirty, they are polluting, and they are sending their energy to us at a profit to them and a loss to us. Biden's blocked Keystone and then turned around and asked OPEC to produce more oil. Trudeau killed 2 pipelines in Canada so that we can't get our product to market or even to ourselves, but the Americans continue to rip us off with a discount on Western oil while we pay a premium on Saudi oil in Eastern Canada. We should build pipelines to get our clean Canadian ethical oil to market while reducing emissions at the same time. Mr. Roy says he respects the sovereignty of the United States. I believe we should start respecting the energy sovereignty of Canada.
Mr. Roy, you have 30 seconds for a final comment.
Pierre. The price of oil isn't dictated by where it comes from, it's dictated by the world markets. So Pierre isn't going to reduce the price of the gas at the pump. What we need to do is transition towards a greener economy. And Alberta is no different. I believe we need to keep supporting a very important industry in Canada, but we also need to provide them with the tools to produce their oil without as much greenhouse gases. And
Time.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
This is for Mr. Roy. This summer, at least 56 churches were burned or vandalized. Some of the attacks targeted churches on First Nations reserves, thereby robbing them of their place of worship. Following the horrible attack against a Muslim family in London, Ontario, the Trudeau government announced 2 emergency national summits, one on anti-Semitism and one on Islamophobia, which took place on July 21st and 22nd. Mr. Roy, why did your government not hold an emergency summit to address the horrible wave of destructive hostility directed at Christian worshipers?
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
Well, the events that occurred are horrible and inexcusable. We had a summit that addressed or looked for solutions to support all communities. I believe that we need to fight against this type of behavior, and it's not necessarily directed at one group or another. I think we need to fight this type of radical behavior at its source. We're seeing an increase in hate online. We're seeing debates increasingly polarized, and we have to take a step back and look at what our true values are to fight against this type of behavior. So I don't have a specific answer to the question of the churches. I think that any type of behavior which is like that is unacceptable, and we have to keep fighting against it. And that's going to occur by working together. It's going to occur by being better educated, and it's going to occur by recognizing the diversity of our nation. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments? No? Okay, thank you. We'll go to more questions, please. Thank you, sir.
This is directed to the Liberal candidate. Do you pledge to vote against any and all tax increases targeted at the middle class? Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Roy, 2 minutes.
To my understanding, there are no planned taxes to the middle class, first of all. We're planning on increasing taxes for those who are most wealthy, to the banks, to increase the revenues. But yes, I will support increasing those taxes, and I would vote against taxes to the middle class. Thank you.
Any comment from the other candidates? Pierre, 45 seconds.
Well, you just can't believe anything Liberals say about taxes. Trudeau said the budget would be balanced in 3 years. And almost the day after the election, he revised that to 20 years. He said there would be a $10 billion deficit. It was almost 30 before COVID. He said the carbon tax would never go above $50. And then after the election, it went to 170. As for the tax on principal residences, it is in the Liberal platform that they will tax them, and their housing czar has specifically written a report in which he talks about the tax applying even on homes that are owned longer than a year and as long as 5 years. So we don't know what the Liberal tax on your principal residence will mean, how high it will be, or when it will apply. All we have is Justin Trudeau's word, which he's got a lot of practice at breaking.
Kevin, do you have a comment? Yes. 45 seconds, Kevin.
Thank you. So I'll let everyone on a little secret about these two parties. These two parties, as they've continued government for 152 years, they've continuously underfunded and interfered with the CRA. Now, that might not seem very important to anyone right now, but as a result of underfunding and interfering with the CRA has to target ordinary Canadians over the wealthy when it comes to tax evasion and tax avoidance. The less resources the CRA has, because they're required a quota to meet with their auditing, they have to target ordinary Canadians. So maybe the first step we should do is actually get the wealthy, the ultra-rich, to pay their fair share and make the CRA actually capable of fighting against them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I will call out a few extra numbers. Ending in 431, if you have a question. Ending in 433. And ending in 448. If you have a question, please come up. Okay, I'll read a couple extra numbers here. Ending in 416. Oh, okay, we have somebody. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. Without using the word reconciliation, which I think is a given, I would like each party to identify a positive, constructive, and concrete solution to the issues that the Aboriginal people are facing today. Thank you.
I believe that was to everybody. So, Kevin, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I guess the one concrete thing, I mean, we have pretty much a roadmap to follow in terms of things. We have, I'm going to have to use the word because it's the name of the commission, but the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the 94 recommendations they've given. And we need to achieve them all. That's the roadmap for us to work with Indigenous nations, to work constructively as well as to recognize the right to self-determination and right to self-governance. I mean, this is something that these two governments have, or these two parties rather, have continuously failed upon doing, and they've continuously had government. We need an actual party, we need an actual member of parliament who's willing to work with Indigenous people, who's willing to actually listen to them, and willing to actually get something done. I don't know if it's actually well known or not, but the Truth and Reconciliation Commission actually approached the Harper government back in, I forget which year, but it was when the report was finished. They had asked for funding to achieve one of the recommendations, which was to identify and honor the residential school children whose lives were lost, who were in unmarked graves. Guess what that government said? They said no. And I'm going to be honest, that's pretty much a cover-up of what happened. It's as a result of that government's decision not to actually follow through on the recommendations and actually go forward with working with Indigenous nations that we only learned about it now when Indigenous nations themselves took upon themselves to actually show us the true horrors of residential schools. I didn't know about this as much as anybody else, and this is something we do need to figure out now and address now. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev.
Yes, I think that one of the most positive things that we can go do is to end poverty on First Nations reserves. Right now, the Indian Act, as it is still called, creates a structure that prevents First Nations communities from developing their own local economies and effectively bans them from participating in the full partnership of our Canadian economy. We need to allow First Nations communities the power to approve resource and commercial projects and to have a title of property for individuals so that people have the ability to own their own homes, have a mortgage that they can pay down to get credit, collateral, and savings for their future, and to participate as full partners in Canada's economy. That will break the cycle of poverty and give young Indigenous people an opportunity and hope for the future.
Mr. Roy.
So the Truth and Reconciliation is the first step. We have a roadmap and we need to keep chipping away at it. That is clearly the direction that we need to take. The right to self-govern and make their own choices is the second one. working with them, working with the different communities to help develop and support the development of their lands and territories are of utmost importance. So I think we're going to see in the coming years a lot of development in these areas, and we need to partner with Indigenous communities so that we grow the economy, grow their local economy, and make sure that they're participating in economic prosperity and growth moving forward. We also need to better educate Canadians with respect to Indigenous cultures and the value and the hardship that they've endured over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask a couple questions we got off of social media. The first one is for all three candidates, and we're going to start with Mr. Polyev. The question is, can all the candidates comment on the competition in the wireless sector in Canada and the Rogers-Shaw merger? Mr. Polyev?
Yes, commenting on competition in a wireless sector, simply put, there's not enough of it. In many places, there's only 2 players. Our policy as Conservatives was to push for 4, and in many markets we achieved that. As a result of having 4 players in many markets, we actually brought prices down. Today, Erin O'Toole announced that we would open up the free market and allow foreign or international companies to compete for your business, as is the case in countries all around the world, and why they have so much lower prices than we do. That would allow you to have a multiplicity of choices. It would force the players to compete for you, your business, on price and quality, and it is proven now, there is no longer any debate, more competition equals lower prices.
Mr. Roy?
We have the Competition Bureau that will look at these types of files and place a recommendation. Myself, I believe in free enterprise. I believe in competition. I think that's the hallmark of business, and that's what will allow us to have better and cheaper services. I think it's also important to recognize the size of our country and the investments necessary for each company to be able to provide services to us. But the Liberal government has been investing in broadband and bringing these types of technologies closer to Canadians that don't have access, appropriate access to that kind of service. So again, I don't have a specific position with respect to the merger or proposed merger. Thank you.
Mr. Kwok?
Thank you. So it's important to understand the current state that we have in our telecom market is the result of the free market. This is known as a market failure. It completely failed to serve consumers. It only helps the big telecommunication companies. Opening us up to American Telecom isn't going to help either. You know what they do down there? They carve up consumers into fiefdoms for themselves. They collude all together. That's not going to help us. That's going to make it worse. You know what we need? We need to bring in a Crown Corporation telecommunication, or a telecommunication Crown Corporation, like they do in Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, they brought in SaskTel, which competes with the big 3. What happened? They have way lower prices than we do in Ontario. That's how we induce competition. If the market can't do it, then the government needs to step in to protect consumers, and that's what I want to do. Thank you.
Before I ask the second question from social media, I'm just going to call out 3 more numbers so people can get in queue. Numbers 458, numbers 402, and numbers 419. If you're one of those numbers, just get ready after this question. The next question came from social media as well. It's going to be directed to Mr. Polyev, and then the other candidates can respond. The question has to do with privatized healthcare and medical assistance in dying. The question simply is, can the candidate please state their party's views on privatized healthcare and assistance in dying? Medical assistance in dying, sorry.
Do they mention which kind of health care they're talking about?
No, it just says regarding privatized healthcare.
Okay. So
Very general.
You mean like, for example, the privatized drugstore in which Mr. Trudeau got his vaccine? Or the privatized, the doctor's offices, which are privatized right now? Is that what we're referring to? Because that's, you know, is what Mr. Roy is proposing here is to shut down your pharmacy and your doctor's offices? I'm just trying to be clear. Conservatives do not believe that we should shut down our public healthcare system. We believe in providing it with the necessary funds in order to provide the care to the patients. And that's why we propose to increase the transfer payment by 6% instead of the 3% that Mr. Trudeau has been doing over the last several years. And that will make sure universal health care is available without charge to every single Canadian.
Mr. Polyev, you have just a little bit of time left, and if you don't mind, I'd like to get you to answer the second part of the question, and then we'll have the other candidates. The other part had to do with your policy on medical assistance in dying.
Yes, we believe that the recent legislation that the government introduced, which would eliminate the 10-day waiting period and make it legal for medical practitioners to suggest assistance in dying to a patient who did not ask for it, or to give it to people who are suffering exclusively from mental illness, is not appropriate. We believe that there should be controls in place to make sure people have an actual choice in their own future, and that there should be enough palliative care so that people who want to carry on living can do so with dignity as well.
Yes.
Do we have other comments? Mr. Roy, 45 seconds.
Thank you. I don't know how we got to me wanting to cancel healthcare. Again, facts matter. It's important to discern what you're hearing and make appropriate decisions. With respect to to the question, I believe that there are processes in place in the medical field to support end of life. And I think it is the compassionate thing to do, and it needs to be obviously taken seriously, and it has to be done appropriately. But I support the right for individuals at the end of their life, in the right circumstances, to make a decision.
Thank you. Mr. Kwong, 45 seconds, please.
It's important to note that we don't actually have true universal health care in Canada. We have universal health care when you go into your doctor's office. That's what we have right now. But we don't have it for prescription medications, vision, dental, mental health. If we really want to truly have universal health care, we need to bring those under the public framework. And we have already seen why we need to do that. 1 in 10 Canadians cannot afford the prescription medications. Millions have to choose between medication and food. I believe it's 22% of Canadians do not go to get their dental checkups. We need to bring all of these under the public framework to truly have universal health care. We don't have universal health care until every Canadian can access their health care without the barriers of cost. Thank you.
And Mr. Polyev, you have 30 seconds more if you wish.
Yes. Let's also remember that the last federal government to cut health care was a Liberal government. Back in the 1990s, when they ran out of money, they had a debt crisis, Liberals slashed health care by $7 billion. We don't know how many lives were lost because of those Liberal cutbacks to health care. That is why it is so important to get our country back on solid financial ground. in order to secure the funds for our healthcare system and secure the future for Canadians.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
My question's for Mr. Roy. Mr. Trudeau answers every question with, "We are here for Canadians." When is he going to be here against China or the two Michaels that he hasn't done anything about? And the people that are still stranded, Canadians in Afghanistan. He's here for all Canadians. He's done nothing for the two Michaels.
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for your question. I believe that with respect to the two Michaels, we've done a lot, and we're continuing to do a lot for them. It's important to remember that negotiation and working with foreign powers of that nature are not necessarily done in the public domain. It's important also that we protect every Canadian that's abroad. If we need to proceed carefully, and if we make the wrong arrangement, or we make an arrangement, then that would prevent every Canadian or other foreign governments to replicate and do the same thing. So, the two Michaels case are important, and I sincerely believe that Mr. Trudeau is working very hard with allies to find a way for them to be released.
Do we have other comments? Mr. Polyev, 45 seconds.
I'll never forget, when Trudeau was asked his favorite government on planet Earth, he said China's basic communist dictatorship was his favorite. Since that time, and since our people have been taken hostage, I agree, we should boo those comments. And since our people have been taken hostage, he's given $250 million of your tax dollars to fund the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which pays for Communist China's infrastructure ambitions. And he has opened the possibility to putting Huawei technology on our 5G network. No to the $250 million for the Asian Infrastructure Bank, and no to Huawei on our 5G network.
Kevin, 45 seconds.
And I'm not here to defend Mr. Roy, but Mr. Polyev, I find it quite hypocritical, or even, quite hypocritical what you're saying, because mostly, the conservatives, they like to talk big about China. But when it actually comes to being government, they aren't big on China. They were the ones who gave China a favorable trade deal under CISA. They're the ones who opened up the Arctic to China. So I'm sorry, I can't exactly take your word to be strong on China on granted either. So, that's just the comment I'm going to make on that. Thank you.
Mr. Roy, you have 30 seconds final if you wish to use it.
Get the correct information.
Again, facts matter, and what Mr. Polyev is saying is inaccurate. So check your facts.
Who fact checks you?
Okay, let's let everybody answer, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I think it's important to, facts matter. I believe that the question was, what are we doing about the two Michaels? And we are doing a lot. And it's not because it's not out in the public domain that nothing's happening. Plenty is happening. And I'd like to repeat that we need to make sure that all Canadians remain safe throughout the world.
Thank you.
You're safe.
Do we have a question here? Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi there. Our question is mainly for Mr. Polyev and as well for all parties, if you could respond. The new conservative carbon tax seems to incentivize people to burn more. How do each of you, with your parties, plan to make our future more sustainable, first of all? And after seeing the Conservative Party reject a climate change in a vote of 54 to 46 earlier this year, How can any progress on this issue be achieved by a conservative government if the majority of your party consistently votes against you?
Mr. Polyev, you have 2 minutes.
Well, the question is first inaccurate. And how can you believe conservatives on climate change? We actually presided over the only reduction in greenhouse gases that has happened by any government in recorded history. And we did it while the economy actually grew. So what are we going to do about it now? Well, instead of a carbon tax which drives industry out of Canada into more polluting foreign jurisdictions and then buying those products back by exporting our jobs and our pollution to other countries, conservatives will allow businesses to pay in directly into their own green fund. So the money won't go to the government coffers. It will go to the businesses' own green projects that can reduce their emissions here in Canada. So imagine if our energy companies, instead of giving the money in taxes and being priced out by foreign oil companies, could keep the money to invest in carbon capture and sequestration, reduction in the burning of fossil fuels to extract it, to use clean and renewable resources of energy in order to bring the product to surface. Imagine if mining companies in Quebec who are mining lithium for electric batteries could keep the money instead of paying it in a tax, so they could invest it in greening their energy use so that we could actually make electric car batteries here in Canada instead of making them with burned coal in China. Imagine if we could make polysilicon here with our clean industries instead for our solar panels, instead of buying solar panels that are made burning coal in China. What we need to do is repatriate the production here, use the money from the carbon payment to fund Canadian innovation and improvements, create more paychecks, and protect the climate. That's the conservative plan.
Do we have any comments from the other candidates? Kevin, I think your hand was up first, 45 seconds.
As for the NDP, I mean, one of the priorities we have is to eliminate the $18 billion of taxpayer money being sent to an environmentally unsustainable, economically unsustainable oil and gas industry. I mean, no, Mr. Poilievre, I'm sorry, is there a problem? 18 billion, that's how much money in taxpayer money was sent by the Liberal government during the past 18 months. That's how much. $18 billion of taxpayer money.
You said
so,
Liberal, and you're telling Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah, I was about to get to a point with Mr. Poilievre because he brought up the issue, he said that, Saudi Arabia would love me. No, I mean, Mr. Poilievre, I would let you on a secret, there's a really great way to get rid of foreign oil. You know how to do it? We go green. We go independent with green energy instead of relying on oil.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Roy, 45 seconds.
Flip the switch tomorrow.
By listening to Mr. Poilievre's plan, wouldn't it be nice if there was no cost on pollution? Wouldn't that be great, for large industries that pollute? Asking them to pollute less, that would be easy, wouldn't it? No. We've got a plan, and that plan is to ensure that there's a price on pollution. We've put that in place, and the revenues that we're collecting from the carbon levy are transferred back to taxpayers, to Canadians. They have an incentive to lower their carbon emissions, and that is the only way we can get and hold large polluters accountable for the pollution that they're creating. That's the plan. It is proven. It has worked throughout the world. And it is being implemented right now.
Mr. Poilievre, you have the final 30 seconds.
So Mr. Waugh would have you throw away your natural gas furnace today. He would have you throw away your internal combustion engine today. Good luck getting home tonight, everybody. Basically, the roads that are made with petroleum products, he would tear them up today. Realistically, that's not going to happen. The alternative that he and the Liberals provide is just to import foreign oil that is made burning more greenhouse gases, that funds dictatorships in faraway lands. We believe that as long as oil is used, it should be clean, green, ethical, Canadian oil from our people to support our country.
Okay, I'm going to call out a few extra numbers. Number 413, number 441, and number 425. Any of those questions? Any of those numbers? Thank you. Okay, sure.
Hi, my name is Karen, and I'm giving this to Mr. Roy. It says the Liberal government attempted to ram through the bill C-10, which many decried as an attack on free speech and what Canadians can freely view online. Despite the public backlash, the Liberal platform pledges to reintroduce this legislation within the first 100 days if elected. Mr. Roy, can you unequivocally pledge your commitment to free speech today, and that will oppose any legislations to seek to impede it? Can we get your answer, yes or no?
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
I wish I could answer yes or no, but it's not that simple. So C10 is not a yes or no question. C10 is to protect content and make sure that it is balanced. So I believe that, no?
Are we all stupid?
Yeah. Let's excuse me, everybody, just a sec. Mr. Roy, if you could just let me interject for a sec. Mr. Roy? Excuse me. Sorry, I just want it for your sake as well. Just as I said earlier, folks, when there's a question asked, let's have the candidates answer the question and let them all have a debate, but please don't interject. It's just not helpful. Sorry, Mr. Roy, go ahead.
Yeah. No, not at all. So the short answer is no. I support C10, and I think it's well thought out, and it is necessary in today's world. So the giants of the internet and content must be carefully protected, and I think that's the way we need to address it. Thank you.
Do we have other comments? Mr. Polyev, 45 seconds.
Yes, well, the C10 would empower a Liberal-appointed bureaucracy to regulate what you see and say online, including user-generated content. That's your posts on social media, folks, regulated by a government bureaucracy, in the words of Mr. Roy, to make sure that you are balanced. Balanced according to who? Who is measuring the scales? Who will decide what is acceptable Canadian content? I believe there are 30 million plus Canadian content producers in this country. They are called Canadian citizens, and they should have their Section 2B rights of freedom of expression. Thank you.
Kevin, 45, no, you're fine. Mr. Roy, you have a final 30 seconds if you wish.
Again, check your facts. I think it's important to make sure what occurs online is fair and balanced. In the case of Mr. Polyev, we all know that isn't a consideration for him. We're seeing, a lot of hate, a lot of misinformation, and it is important to protect the integrity of the information that we're all receiving and using to make decisions in life.
Thank you. Okay, before I ask another question from social media, I'm just going to call out two numbers, and if you'd like to get in the queue, number ending in 444 and the number ending in 427. Okay, and I'm just going to ask this question first. The question is to all three candidates, and I think we'll start with Mr. Q. Kevin, this questioner wants to know what in particular, what would be your priorities to improve the priorities within our riding here in Carleton?
My priorities in terms of the riding. I'll be honest, I don't know if I have one in particular for the riding itself. The issues that I want to address are particularly national, and they affect every Canadian that lives here. I mean, one of the bigger issues that I definitely have that I want to address is the issue of climate change. I mean, our riding itself has been affected, and Ottawa itself has been affected by the effects of climate change. We've seen with the flood a few years ago, we've seen it with the tornadoes. The weather is becoming more and more erratic, and we see this becoming a problem. The price of beef has gone up due to the issues of drought in the farmland. So, I mean, if I were to choose an issue that I could as much orient towards the riding, it would be the issue of climate change, because my own future is going to be on the line when it comes to this issue of climate change if we don't address it. I strongly believe in a human creed that transcends all religions, all nations, that it is our duty to pass along a better world to the next generation. That's something we need to do, and climate change is a particular part of that we need to address. Thank you.
Mr. Roy?
Infrastructure. So I think we need better infrastructure. We need an extension of the LRT, for example. We need better public transit. A lot of growing communities throughout the riding need community centers. We need better access to healthcare. And I think those priorities are certainly very much achievable. When we're building public transit, we need to think about green and sustainable. The same goes for community center, creating zero emission or net zero buildings, and working with the province to ensure that we incentivize physicians to practice locally. Are some of the main priorities that I see are necessary here in the riding.
Mr. Polyev?
Well, one practical thing I think we can do is start to make better use of the abundant space we have in this country. Think about it. We have federal buildings that are empty all night and houses that are empty all day. And we force people to spend an hour and a half going across town to do things that they could do at home. I think that we could have a hybrid model in the public service, allowing those who demonstrate they can get the job done remotely to work at home and be judged by what they produce, not by where they produce it, and where they can book a space to work with colleagues in person when necessary. That will free up space, reduce the cost of real estate, transportation, gas, pollution, increase the amount of time our public servants have with their families, all at once. I think this is a common sense approach that COVID has proven can work.
Thank you. I think we have a question. Yes?
Thank you. I haven't heard anything about the military brought up by any of the parties, and I do have a concern because I'm very involved with them. And we just sent our special forces over to Afghanistan. We weren't there very long, but they were in a lot of danger. I have never seen the morale so bad in the special forces. I was just with some of those fellows that walked from Petawawa that had to raise money for themselves because they're not getting the funds from the government. They're having to buy their own boots right now because the supplies are so bad. The morale is bad. I know at least 3 individuals, 4, with psychological problems. They're not getting support from higher up, and I've never seen them so angry. Does anybody care? They don't have a voice. They're not allowed to say what they feel. But somebody needs to listen to them. And I'm just wondering, we don't have the proper air power. Our Air Force has gone right down the tubes. We couldn't even get our own people out of Afghanistan. We're relying more and more on the Americans right now. They've canceled the airplanes we were supposed to get. We don't have hardly any airplanes. If anything happened in Canada, we'd have to go running to the States for help. We used to have an Air Force. We used to have an Army. And these guys are struggling when they have to buy their own boots. It's never been so bad as under the present government. Does anybody care? Yeah.
So we'll start with Mr. Roy, please.
I certainly do. We need to support and respect the armed forces here in Canada. I don't have a complete answer to your question. I think we owe it to them to invest adequately in our military. They've been there and they've remained there for us. There is support offered with respect to mental health, and I believe we can do more.
Mr. Polyev?
Yes, I too care about our armed forces, and I think we can do better. I think we do need to restore a fighter jet program. We need an Air Force. I think we need to supply our forces with the funds necessary to fulfill the strong, secure, and engaged mandate, which is a very ambitious mandate, but without the dollars or the logistical support to back it up. We are asking our soldiers to do more and more with less and less, and they're suffering as a result. And not a day goes by that I don't encounter a veteran suffering with the aftermath of their commitment to the country. Finally, I think we need to bolster the Helmets to Hard Hats program so that young veterans can take their military skills and apply them as tradespeople and business people in the civilian economy. Thank you.
Mr. Hua?
Yeah, I think we have finally a moment of unity between the three candidates. I too do care about this issue as well. We do need to ensure that our armed forces have the resources they need, the tools they need, the weapons they need, and that's what a new democratic government will do. We will ensure on that front as well. A big issue that was brought up was the issue of mental health. Veterans, soldiers have gone without a lot of the supports they need in terms of mental health. A new democratic government would ensure to invest strongly into that and ensure that the support and the services are there that they need, as well as the fact that we need to stop taking veterans to court over their pensions. Give them what they deserve, give them what they did to sacrifice for this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a question here. Yes, sir, go ahead.
So I'll be as quick as I can. It's increasingly clear that China sees itself as reasserting its position as an imperial power. It's increasingly bellicose towards its neighbors, and it's brutal to its citizens. In the past year, governments and NGOs around the world have condemned the Beijing regime for its ethnic cleansing and genocide against Uyghurs and ethnic Kazakhs in Xinjiang. The Trudeau cabinet abstained from a motion on the matter in Parliament. This question was for Mr. Roy, by the way, I apologize. Do you believe that the Beijing government is guilty of genocide in Xinjiang right now?
Good question.
Mr. Roy, 2 minutes.
I'm not familiar with the issue. I'll be completely transparent. We have challenges with respect to China and the way they treat people. I believe in democracy. I believe that everyone deserves a safe and secure place to call home. And I trust that Foreign Affairs and our government is proceeding with best policy with respect to China at the current time.
Boo!
Sorry.
Mr. Kwan, would you like to make a comment? 45 seconds.
So I do believe what is occurring in Xinjiang is a cultural genocide, a genocide against the Uyghur people. I believe that our foreign policy should be dictated by a direction of human rights. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev?
Well, I do want to correct, so the answer is yes, I do believe it is genocide. I did vote in the House of Commons to recognize it as a genocide. But I do want to correct something that Mr. Hua said earlier. He said that he claimed that somehow a previous government had signed a trade deal with China and given over the Arctic. Well, Canada does not have a trade deal with China, and China is not in control of the Arctic. So I want to correct those facts. We conservatives believe in a robust foreign policy that requires we bring more production home, make more in Canada. One of the reasons we're becoming so dependent on China is because we borrow from the world to buy from China. We need to unleash the productive forces of our economy to make it here.
Thank you. Mr. Roy, 30 seconds if you wish.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. All right, let me call out a couple extra numbers. We're getting close to the time frame here, but there's still some time. Number 438, number 428, and number 434. If you have those numbers and wish to ask a question, you can come up to the front. In the meantime, I have another question here from social media that we'll ask all the candidates. We'll start with Mr. Polyev. What is your position on our commitment to building affordable housing in our riding?
Well, we're the only ones with a plan to build affordable housing. We will, first of all, let's start with the problem. The problem is that the federal government is subsidizing demand by printing cash and giving the banks no-fault insurance for mortgage defaults. And local governments are limiting supply. So you have one level of government that's killing off the supply and the other that's ballooning demand. No wonder you have the most expensive real estate in the world. Even though we have more land than anyone else on planet Earth, you spread us all out, we each have 33 CFL football fields to ourselves, and yet we can't find space for people to live. So what should we do? Well, the federal government has poorly used its 37,000 buildings. The Conservatives will allow more work from home and better optimization of that space so that we can sell off 15% of federal office space and real estate across the country to free up more land for affordable housing. Second, we're going to make it a condition of funding local infrastructure for municipalities to more quickly and affordably approve construction so that we can bring private supply onto the market. The government is spending $70 billion on affordable housing right now. $70 billion, and yet the average house is 2/3 more expensive than the average family can afford. So obviously it's not working. The Canadians are paying once when they buy a house and twice when they pay their taxes. The answer is not no more big, fat government programs. The answer is to unleash private sector construction of affordable housing to make 1 million new homes in the next 3 years available to Canadian buyers.
Mr. Roy.
So the federal Liberals have a plan with respect to creating affordable housing, and they've been implementing this plan over the last number of years. They've created a large number of new units. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's a mistake to think that affordable housing and new residential, new builds we're talking about the same thing. So affordable housing is housing that's dedicated for low-income Canadians, and we have a plan to build a significant number and continue to invest in that. We've actually surpassed what was planned most recently. The Liberals have a plan also to make housing more accessible, working with municipalities to incentivize them to accelerate building permits so that more new housing can be brought online. And we have a target of several 100,000 new builds in the next platform. Thank you.
Mr. Kwa.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to be repeating myself a bit because we've already kind of answered this question. But again, the NDP plan is tackling it both from the demand and supply side. The supply side, we need to get shovels on the ground. We need to start building houses. So 500,000 units of affordable housing as quickly as we can. On the supply side, we need to address the issue of speculation, particularly through a foreign buyer's tax of 20%. I know Mr. Polyev wants to rely on the free market on this, but the thing is, the free market right now is causing the problem we have with supply. We're producing more and more of these large houses, large mansions that are being demanded by foreign buyers who want to speculate, who want to invest, who want to leave these empty so that they can just make more of their wealth. What we need to do is actually step up and step in to start building more units of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I have another question.
If I get a response on that one?
Well, I think everybody had ample time there, correct? Is that fair? Okay, ma'am.
My question is for Mr. Roy. As I'm sure you know, Justin Trudeau has been investigated by the Ethics Commissioner 3 times. Guilty in 2017 when he took a free vacation to the Aga Khan's Island, who was simultaneously lobbying the government for a grant. Guilty in 2019 with the SNC Lavalin affair, when he tried to intervene in a criminal prosecution and get a corporate criminal off the hook, and then he fired his attorney general for saying things that he didn't like. And then 2020 brought us the WE scandal, where he tried to give $500 million to a group who had paid his family $500,000. So my question is, Mr. Roy, are you comfortable with the Prime Minister's habitual ethics violations?
Mr. Roy, you have 2 minutes.
I think the Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, is defending Canadian workers. He's defended SNC Lavalin. And I believe with respect to the WE, the intent was to get students to work over the summer during the pandemic.
And you want us to vote for you?
I do, yes.
Holy mother.
Sir,
so
please,
I think ultimately it is the responsibility of the Prime Minister to ensure that we are supporting Canadians. And it's, difficult when you're trying to get programs up quickly, especially with respect to the summer student initiative, and get the money out the door so that they can contribute during the pandemic. So thanks to the opposition, who literally blew things out of proportion, we ended up having to support students over the summer on CERB, rather than have capable individuals in the population helping out Canadians at a time of need.
Mr. Polyev, 45 seconds.
Where do you start? Unbelievable. Well, if they really wanted to support students to work in the summer, there's something called the Canada Summer Jobs Program. It has existed for decades. Local businesses and charities have benefited it from for years. Trudeau actually cut that program and gave the money over to this group that had paid his family $500,000. So that's why this scandal occurred. And as for SNC Lavalin, remember they said we'd lose 10,000 jobs if the company was prosecuted? Well, because of Jody Wilson-Raybould's courage, Trudeau had to back off, and SNC was prosecuted. Did 10,000 people lose their jobs? Nope. Still working today. This was never about jobs. It was always about protecting a corporate criminal that had donated to the Liberal Party.
Thank you. Mr. Claw? 45 seconds, Kevin.
Thank you. So just a quick correction. Students weren't relying on CERB, they were relying on the CSB, which was brought in by the NDP pressuring the Liberals because they left students out of CERB. Now, on the issue of habitual ethics violation and corruption, I mean, it should be noted that it's these two parties that have always had a habitual, continuous pattern of corruption. I believe the questioner actually forgot one scandal as well, was the SNC donation scandal, which was that SNC Lavalin got their employees, or essentially pressured their employees to donate for these two political parties. Why? Because they knew those two would be the ones to win. They knew these two would be the ones that they could control and use money to control. So I think people should take into account who SNC Lavalin and other large corporations are donating to as to who has their voice. Thank you.
Mr. Roy, if you want to have 30 seconds.
Again, check your facts. With respect to SNC Lavalin, I don't think the story ended quite how Mr. Bolivar is suggesting. And the summer students, thank you for correcting me, but the fact of the matter is we had a program, or there was a program, it was well thought out and needed to be deployed, and because of overzealous opposition parties, we ended up not having that available for Canadians. The summer jobs program was not available during the COVID in the way that Mr. Bolivar was describing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have this evening. We still have to have some closing comments, so I think we're going to have to cap the questions. Those were wonderful questions. Thank you very much for everybody who participated. It was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, before our final comments, we're going to have our closing comments from each of the candidates. And we're going to start a 2-minute closing comment with Mr. Roy.
Thank you. So earlier today, Pierre said that the pandemic program must end with the pandemic. I agree, but we're in a fourth wave and this pandemic, and that's why we're providing targeted support to those that are still affected. The people of Carleton are looking for leadership. They're worrying about the rising cost of living, climate change, and finishing the fight against COVID. I get that, but I don't get the impression Pierre does. He's going to make life more expensive. He wants to cancel $10 a day childcare, for example, and cutting services to save money. Yet he's willing to spend more money on police and the military. Worst of all, Pierre thinks keeping people from going bankrupt during the pandemic was a waste of money. That's why the Liberal plan is the only one that can finish the fight against COVID and build a better Canada that helps everyone move forward. Notre plan de calibre mondial, le Canada atteindra un niveau d'émissions net zéro pour l'an 2050. C'est ainsi que nous positionnerons pour l'avenir et devenir un leader économique mondial. Moi, je vais m'assurer que Carleton participera à la relance économique. Carleton, it's time to vote for an MP that better represents your values. One that fights to make life more affordable and takes action against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kwok.
Thank you. So through this election campaign, we've seen a lot of vitriol and hate, admittedly, a lot of vandalization of signs, even assault against the Prime Minister as such. I can understand that people are definitely frustrated and angry, especially through this pandemic. People are even turned off by politics as a result of this. I ask you not to be turned off by politics. I ask you to continue to be involved, continue to voice yourselves. We need a government that can stand up against the ultra-rich, against large corporations, that stand up for Canadians. I recently made the mistake of reading the YouTube comments on the Rogers TV debate. Curiosity got the better of me. And let's just say there were a lot of colorful comments about me, perhaps because people were a little intimidated by my age. But I think it's important that we have somebody young elected to Parliament. The average age of a parliamentarian is 40. And there are very few members of Parliament who are elected under the age of 30. We need somebody who has a voice for the youth in this country, and we need somebody who can stand up for the issues for the youth. It's my future that's going to be impacted, and more importantly, I have much of my life ahead that's going to face the consequences of whatever policy is going to be implemented by this next government. So I think it's important that when you cast your ballot on September 20th, or at the advanced polling, or at the returning office, because I believe many of you are parents and grandparents, you have children, grandchildren, that you take them into consideration. Those who can't vote, those who can't have a voice on the issues, that you take them into consideration and what sort of future, what sort of government they need to support them. Thank you.
Mr. Polyev.
Well, in a moment of unity, I want to agree with something that Kevin said. He points out that he is a very young candidate, and I actually think that's excellent. I think we need more young people running for Parliament. I was young when I first ran, and the people in my constituency, which was at the time did not include Stittsville, but they took a risk on me, and I think it's very positive that young, informed people like Kevin have stepped up to the plate. and made their voices heard. I'm not necessarily encouraging you to vote against me and for him, but I do think we should all treasure the fact that youth have the opportunity to run for office. But on the same note, I worry about what happens to this country if we continue to have the growing divide between rich and poor that has resulted from the ballooning asset prices in general and housing prices in particular. If you have a $10 million mansion, the last year and a half has been great for you. You probably made $3 million just sitting in your mansion. But if you're that working class kid I told you about, Dakota, who works over at a scrap metal shop, or the couple I met at a trailer park in Greeley who can't afford to leave the trailer park where they're renting, even though together they make $100,000, then you've been left behind. Your dollar is worth less today than it was a year and a half ago. Inflation has robbed you of the money that you have earned through your hard labor. And what I worry is that many young people might lose hope. Well, we need to bring that hope back. We need to unleash the construction of 1 million new homes. Stop printing money to protect the value of a dollar. Make it possible for us to have bigger incomes so that young people and all people can afford the life that we were promised here in Canada. In other words, make more, cost less, paychecks, not debt. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Just a few closing comments, everybody. First of all, I want to thank all of the candidates for coming tonight. I thought it was a great, healthy debate. Thanks for running. Thanks for putting your name forward. I know it's a lot of work and dedication, and I personally thank each of you for coming here tonight and coming forward. So thank you very much. I also want to thank everybody in the audience. I thought the questions were excellent, very diverse, and I think everybody did a wonderful job participating. Thank you so much. I have to say, this is a little partisan, but isn't it nice we have a venue in middle of Stittsville we can hold something like this? Yeah. It's a pretty nice village square, don't you think? It really is. And two other people I want to thank that are here tonight. I was missed when I made my opening comments, that they do so much for the community here. They really do, and they do so much for the business sector. Leslie McKay from the Stittsville Central, the online paper, then Leslie does such a great job for the community, and of course John Curry from the Community Voice. John and Leslie are everything we do here. They support the community in so many ways, and they're just great assets for the community. So I want to thank both Leslie and John for being here. And just as a little pitch, as the president of the Business Association, it's never a bad time to support local business. Our local businesses need you now more than ever. We're still in the midst of the pandemic. Please support your local business, and all I ask you to do is, before you buy any good or service for your family, think local first. That's all I ask you to do. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.